Hello, this is John Majori with MajoriOnBowie.com. And this is the Majori on Bowie YouTube channel, where I post a new interview every week that has something to do with David Bowie. And for daily content, visit the blog, www.majorionbowie.com, where I post something new every single day that almost always has something to do with David Bowie. And today I have a very, very special guest. Donny McCaslin is an extraordinary musician whose boundary pushing work has redefined what the saxophone can do in music. His playing is as distinctive as a human voice, with a career spanning jazz, rock, and experimental sounds that really defy characterization. He had already made a name for himself as an innovator in the jazz world before stepping into the studio with David Bowie to record Blackstar. His collaboration with Bowie resulted in one of the most celebrated albums of the 21st century. Beyond Blackstar, Donny has subsequently released albums that push forward the fusion of jazz and rock, while also keeping David Bowie's spirit alive by participating in alumni shows and through his Blackstar Symphony, which I'm going to ask him about. I recently saw Donny perform in what is now the annual Sound and Vision of David Bowie concert at the Cutting Room in New York City, with 11 Bowie alum performing 30 songs. It was a spiritual experience, and his playing was surely one of the highlights. His most recent album is I Want More. You see the cover right up on the screen. And if you want more Donny McCaslin, you're in luck because he's my guest today. So welcome.
Thanks, John. Nice to be here.
So the first question I want to ask you is neither about yourself nor about David Bowie, but can you explain who is Maria Schneider and how does the path to Blackstar go through her?
I'd be happy to talk about Maria Schneider. She's just an incredible musician, composer, orchestrator, who I've had the pleasure of working with for many years. And, when I first moved to New York, there was a club in the West Village called Visiones, right down the street from the Blue Note. And she had every Monday night there, she would play the Maria Schneider Orchestra. And I got to know some of the people in the band, and I would go down and listen. And eventually, I got called. I started getting called to sub. Rick Margitza, who was playing in the band, would call me to sub, and then I got to know Rich Perry, and he would call me. So I was there a lot. In fact, like my ritual was Monday night was basketball night, so I would go play with some other musicians, and then I would check the clock and then tap out of the game, take a cab down to Visiones with my horn, and then do the gig. But she is just, I'm trying to think how to talk about her because I have such big feelings about her, so much admiration. I mean, my history with her was, as I mentioned, starting subbing at Visiones, and then when she made the record Concert in the Garden is when I joined the band full time, and that was maybe 20 years ago. But she has just really been an artist who has stayed true to what her musical voice and what her musical vision is, in this field that's there's so many major influences in large ensemble writing. Duke Ellington, Gil Evans, Bob Brookmeyer, Count Basie. I mean, just the list goes on and on. And she's been able to synthesize the things that really appeal to her into this very deeply personal language, and she stayed true to that, which I admire a lot. And she's just the hardest worker. Maria is so uh, dedicated to honing her craft. And I've been able to see it where, so we'll have a sound check and she'll bring in a sketch, and then the next sound check she's modified it, and then a month later she's modified it again, and it's finding the right voicings and the right flow of the song. So yeah, just a lot of love and respect and inspiration. Working with her has just had an indelible mark on my development as a musician. And she was contacted at a certain point by somebody from Bowie's team about doing a collaboration, and it was some months before she was preparing to make her own record, and I think she was weighing whether or not to get she had the bandwidth to do this project. And we talked about it at one point, and I said, yeah, it'd be something to consider. I mean, he's such a major artist and so interesting. And so eventually she decided to do it, and she was meeting with David. David was going to her apartment, and they were working on Sewer and a Season of Crime. And after one of the sessions, she just called and said, "Hey, we were, I think David, was trying to describe what he was hearing as the rhythmic underpinning of that, and it reminded me of a record of yours." So I played him, excuse me, Casting for Gravity, and I said, you should do something with Donnie and his band, um, which was, you know, such a startling thing to hear on the telephone. Um, and 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 then I think a couple weeks later we talked again, and she said, "Yeah, I told David you should do something with you. I think it'd be great." And then a little time, short time passed, and it's okay. We're going to come hear you guys at the 55 bar, and that's what set the wheels in motion for Blackstar. And then really, um, we had that gig at the 55 bar, and it was just a few days later that the first workshop session had been set up for Sewer and a Season of Crime with Maria. Uh, Jay Anderson on her was playing bass. Mark Juliana, from my group was playing drums. Ryan Keberly on trombone. Maria, David, and Tony Visconti. And so that's where I met David for the first time, and that's the pathway where it
Yeah.
connected. Yeah,
So fast forwarding a little bit, I read that once he started working with you on the album, that you had said that you wanted to better familiarize yourself with his back catalog, and he urged you not to. Is that
yeah,
is that a true
that's
story? And how did
that's a
that?
true story.
Yeah,
Um, that was yeah, it was an email exchange, and I got to a certain point, I think, with the first batch of songs he had sent, where I felt like, okay, I'm I have a handle on the scope of these, so let me do some more due diligence and inform myself a little more. So I sent him an email, and just kind of casually mentioning that, and then he was curious, well, what are you checking out? And then I had a long list of songs, and his response was, the spirit of his response was, that was some old stuff. I'm doing something new now.
yeah, yeah,
And I took that to be, okay, cool. I'm not going to listen then. And because
yeah,
I guess I realized that, he wanted, my feeling was from that exchange was that he wanted me to filter the music he was sending me through my musical lens, and not to be probably too influenced by, like, oh, what about the saxophone solo on this or this earlier, or whatever. And so I could appreciate it. I was like, yeah, he wants us to do what we do and not be too affected by his catalog. So I
yeah,
went forth. I went forth with that modus operandi, and it wasn't until um, everything had happened, the big stuff had happened, that then I really delved deeply into his catalog.
yeah. So he didn't just um, want you not to be overly influenced with what he did in the past. He he tasked you with pulling the band together. So he had relationships with excellent musicians going back, to the early '70s, and none of them are on this album. It's your band, and I never met David Bowie, but if I ever did, one of the things I thank him for is introducing me to musicians that I wouldn't otherwise know. So
Mm.
subsequently, after Blackstar was released, I started listening to your music, and it occurred to me that Blackstar is a Donny McCaslin album with David Bowie as the guest singer.
Oh, that's very generous of you. I mean, that's very generous. I mean, you know, I yeah, I would say, one thing that was so special about the experiences is obviously, we had this group where we were playing together a lot, and we'd established this dialogue and a way of interacting, and current as it stood at that moment, Ben Monder wasn't touring with me. I had done previous iterations of my group. Ben had been heavily featured, but I'd switched to um, this more electronica thing, the idea of the intersection, exploring the intersection of improvisation, ambient music, bass and drum, electronica, as I understood it, with with Jason, Tim, and Mark. Um, but I had this history with Ben that I just mentioned, and so when we had one day where the four of us got together without Ben, just to play through the songs before we started in the studio with David, and everybody was ready. It sounded great, and then when we were in the studio with him, one thing that was just so great was it felt like he stepped right into the dynamic and just sort of lifted all of us higher with
Yeah.
his focus, with his energy, with his the conviction that he sang with, and with these great songs. You
Yeah.
know, the nuts and bolts of all the songs that are on Blackstar, and even the ones that weren't on Blackstar, were all present in the demos that he sent me. I mean, it wasn't there was no sense of us reinventing the wheel. I mean, the one song, the outlier to that would be Dollar Days, which I could talk about in more detail, but the rest, the nuts and bolts were there. So we just, played it through our musical language. And of course I added a lot of things, a lot of woodwinds, and we added layers of keyboard. Jason added layers of keyboards and whatnot, but like the DNA was there and it was just such a great fit. And I
Yeah.
think part of that I attribute to um, I remember him emailing me like, well, and I can't remember what song it was, John, but there was one piece where he said in the email he sent me the demo and said something like, this is sort of like an Alpha and Omega feeling, which is a song off Casting for Gravity, a cover. It's not an original of mine, but it's a Boards of Canada tune that we covered, and so what I took from that is okay, he's checking us out, and it wasn't just my record or my videos that were online. I'm sure it was also Jason's group Now Versus Now, Mark's group Beat Music, and all. I mean, I think he was doing, he was checking out what we did, and I can't tell you exactly. Well, it influenced this song that way. I don't know. I can't say that, but he was checking out what we were doing, and that had an influence on
Yeah.
some sort of influence on what he was doing. And then when Ben came in, we did the first 2 weeks. We did a week, the four of us with David, and then there was about a month off. And then another week, four of us with David, and then James Murphy. And then the last 4 or 5 recording days, Ben was there. And again, Ben just stepped in and just took it to another level. It was amazing. Yeah, this one anecdote I've shared a few times, but Ben was just warming up as he does. Ben is a how did he just, there's nobody who practices more than Ben Monder. He's so diligent and just incredible. So he's, doing his thing. And then David said something to the tune of, could you just come over and do that in my apartment? It was, and I might be kind of misrepresenting exactly how
Yeah.
David said it, but it was beautiful. I was so touched to hear that over the headphones because Ben is unassuming
Yeah.
considering what a genius he is. He's a pretty unassuming guy. And I was like, and David was just, loved what he was doing. It was great.
Yeah. Wow. So it works so well, right? The synthesis of what you were doing works so well that the album, it holds a really special place among his albums. And
Mhm.
I just, just in the last 2 months, this is random. This is not comprehensive. Um, Uncut ranked it as the best album of the 21st century thus far. Um,
Yeah.
Rolling Stone ranked it as the 24th, and 24, but of not the best 24th best Bowie album, the 24th best album
Mm.
of the last 25 years. There is there's a website called Screen Rant that ranked Bowie albums from first to last, and it ranked Blackstar as his very best album.
Mm.
And it's I'm just saying this because it's an accomplishment that I'm a fan of a lot of David Bowie's later albums, and I think that there's albums like One Outside or Heathen that don't get the credit that they're due. but
Mhm.
album is held with such reverence, that it's like his career would not have been complete without it. And
Mm.
it really, to me, it sounds like you could listen from, sort of putting aside the self-titled debut, you could listen from Space Oddity through Blackstar, and Blackstar ties everything together.
Mm.
Were you even conscious of this when you're making or are you approaching it song by song?
Um, Song by song.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to remember. I mean, I definitely studied the lyrics.
yeah,
Some were placeholder, some, more developed. Um, but really, I was just in it, I was in the moment as much as
yeah,
possible. And because in a situation like that, there's just so much in the air, and for me and my process, it was best to just stay focused on the music right in front of me.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so that was that's how I handled the situation, I guess you would say. Just, every moment trying to be really present and give my all to make every moment of the recording be the highest level it could be.
yeah. I don't want to get too far into like between two ferns territory, but just I mean, even then, did you get a sense that you were working on something that was momentous, that was something that was uh different, and it's going to last?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And I think, um, maybe one way to describe it is, we had all signed non-disclosure agreements, so we weren't naturally supposed to talk about this to anybody.
yeah,
And so it was this almost surreal thing where you walk into the studio, into this very special experience, something that you kind of dream to be a part of as a musician, where he has just given us the green light to do whatever we want. And the songs are, in my opinion, tremendous.
yeah,
And we would finish one, add the overdubs, and then listen, and I think all of us felt like, wow, that sounds so great.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and then leaving the studio that night and just most every day feeling like that was a really special day. The music sounds great. I'm so happy with how this is going, or that's maybe, just thrilled that
yeah.
this is how happening. And then stepping out into the world and then trying not to think about it and not talking about it. And, and so I think, but there was also a sense of, again, not wanting to get in front of myself and think about, well, how's the album going to be received, or what are people going to say? Because I didn't know I didn't know if the album was going to come out. I didn't know what songs would be on the album. I didn't know when it would come out. There's so many variables that were like out of my control, and then I didn't want to think about. I just wanted to stay in that special environment and present with the music and present
Yeah,
with everybody. And so, but yes,
yeah,
all of us were just like, especially in and I know David felt that way too. I know he did, but we
yeah,
were all just like, wow, that was,
yeah,
really great. So
yeah,
yeah, it was kind of, it felt like, an experience of a lifetime.
yeah. Well, I'll say one last thing on just the magnitude of the album before getting back to actual questions. I
Yeah.
recently interviewed a woman who teaches a class on David Bowie at a college in Texas, and her
Mm,
students are 18. And I asked her, did they what did they know of David Bowie? And she said they knew Blackstar. And
mm,
one of the things I thought was interesting about that was they wouldn't have known Blackstar because it was a hit in 2016 because they would have been too young. So for somebody who has everything right out in front of them, right? Blackstar is comes into their consciousness at the same time as Space Oddity or Ziggy Stardust. That's how she answered the question. Um, so moving on. You mentioned Sue or In a Season of Crime, which was a version of which was released as a single more than a year before the album. And I don't play music myself, but I found that the single version was so different than the version on the album that I almost thought it was kind of a head fake. So my
Mm,
expectations of the album were challenged with that as being the seed. And
mhm.
am I making that up, or was that intentional? Was that a sort of a kind of a David Bowie misdirection?
Um, I mean, I don't really know the strategy behind it.
Yeah,
It was more just that he said he wanted to do Sue, and then the question became, well, how do we approach Sue after you've had the Maria version, which has full large ensemble, overdubbing, contrabass, clarinet and contrabass trombone, like
yeah,
really, really, really big orchestration. So how do we approach it? And that was one song where we tried a few different approaches. And eventually what ended up working best was actually me doing a sort of a miniature version with the woodwinds of Maria's score, which is not nearly as present on the Black Star record, but there's moments where if you're really listening, you hear some woodwinds and stuff that sort of mark some of the changes through the form. Um, and then we left out the rubato section um, that is present on the Maria version. But we kind of hewed more closely to hers after trying a few different sort of song form things, and it works out beautifully. I mean, I love it. I love the version on Black Star too. Um, it's so raw and and man, there's a moment near the end of that where David says Sue, he sings this really high note,
yeah,
and it's sort of it's in kind like kind of in a different key than we're in the band, and to hear how Tim and Mark and Jason sort of adjust to go with him. It's near the end of the track. It's such an exciting moment. It's such like a free jazz, provocative thing for him to do. And I know that, that's something that happened in real time. Like he sung that in the room with us. And, I'm sure some of the vocals on that were overdubbed later for sonic reasons or whatever. But like that was a really special moment that kind of captures the hybrid of this, where that's kind of stuff that we do a lot where somebody plays something and then we go to another key or we go to another tempo or whatever. It's just like instant modulation. And then again, he was the one, he sets that note out there like, like with a megaphone or something. And then the band just goes nuts behind him. It was awesome. It was awesome. I just had goosebumps in that moment in the studio. I'll never forget it. And we're listening back to it and I was like, woo, that shit is killing. It was so great.
yeah.
So great.
Wow. Uh, after Black Star, you released an album called Beyond Now,
Yes.
in 2016, and you did it with many of the musicians who worked on Black Star.
Mhm.
And you're describing this exhilarating experience of making the album with Bowie. Did you feel like you guys just wanted to keep on playing because it's almost like a Black Star Part Two?
Yeah, yeah, I definitely yeah. I wanted
Yeah,
to recapture, as I've described, it was such a special experience and and I thought, yeah, I want to have as much of that magic, in this session too, and what can I do to make it as similar to that in terms of just the vibe and the way we record, you
yeah,
know. And then the music was definitely influenced, there's a couple covers, of course. Um, and and some of the songwriting is definitely influenced by the Black Star experience. Um, but that happened so closely after. Um, then there was a gap until I made this record called Below, and that one, in a way, felt also it felt more connected to actually some of the deeper seeds of Blackstar to me. Just that record, the ethos being songs at the center, and the saxophone role being kind of undefined as even when we went into the studio. There's some instrumentals on there, but so much of it is based around the songwriting and how it and putting together this collection of influences. Like it almost felt the thing with that record, it felt like I was on my way somewhere without a GPS, not really sure where I was going, but just trusting that I was going to arrive somewhere interesting,
Yeah.
which harkens back to something that David said to me, and I know he said it to other people, and probably there's an interview where he talks about that too, where he says, you're onto something when you're uncomfortable, and you're, basically that, and some variation of that, and I thought when I was getting ready for Blow. Whereas Beyond Now, it was known, right? This is my
Yeah.
band. We've been playing, blah, blah, blah. It's extension. Then Below was really like, yeah, I'm definitely uncomfortable. And I
Yeah.
definitely don't know where this is going, but I'm trusting, and it worked out.
Yeah.
It
I
worked
do
out.
want to ask you a couple more questions about Beyond Now. You mentioned
Sure,
a
of
couple
course.
covers. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the covers is A Small Plot of Land, which is not one of Bowie's better known songs. It's off of One Outside, but I don't think it was a single. And
Mm.
I want to ask you two questions about this. But first of all, how is it that you came to choose this as one of the two Bowie covers on the album?
Well, I had definitely been listening to various tunes, looking for something that felt like it would be a good fit for what we do.
Yeah.
And I can't remember right now to tell you what, there was a five or six or whatever. And David Binney, who produced that record, a good friend of mine, we were having back and forth around it. He might have sent me that one as an option. I don't quite remember, but really when I heard it, I immediately I felt like, yes, this is I can feel the fit here. This
Yeah.
kind of open thing. I think Yossi Fine is playing bass on that track and on the original track, and I just felt like right away I could hear us getting into something interesting on that.
Yeah.
Um, and Jeff Taylor, I thought would be just, a great choice for somebody who could bring his own ethos and vibe to that tune.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I bought the CD when it came out in 2016, and I listened to it from time to time, but I wasn't before last week. I never listened to it in anticipation of interviewing you, right? So I
Okay.
was just listening to it, and I until this last week did not actually realize that the song "Beyond Now" is separate from the cover of A Small Plot of Land because it almost seamlessly blends into this this frenzy, this without lyrics. And
Mm.
I, I'm going to ask you another time you've done this, but it occurred to me: is this how you would have approached making the song if you were playing on Outside? Is this like Donny McCaslin's version of Outside, or was that sequencing deliberate, or is it just a trick of the ear?
Yeah, I think that was something that when we put the songs close together because it felt like there was a
Yeah,
natural flow there,
yeah,
you know. So yeah, wanting it, having it feel like, and the word is escaping me suddenly. That there's just a bridge between the two songs, and it's not song A and song A ends, and then there's a 3 second pause or 4 second pause or
right,
whatever, and you go to
yeah,
song B. It felt like there could be this natural segue. Segue is the word of like just a sort of natural segue from one to the other. Yeah, the idea, trying to take the listener on a journey, where you, as the story unfolds, you move from one to the next without a clear break.
yeah. So I saw you do something like this at the concert at the Cutting Room
Mm,
when you were playing on Lazarus, the song, and Galan Dorsey was singing it, and you were playing sax. But there's a point at which she stops singing, and you're just playing, and you get into this frenzy, and this crescendo where I I just, the word that was rolling around in my head was, this is like communing with the spirit, right? This is religious, right? And
Mm,
she, at this point, gets on her knees, right? And
mm,
she's not, it's not like she's worshiping you. It's like, it's a moment, it's almost like it's a prayer. And it's that
mm,
same sort of taking the song, the sort of the part that we're familiar with, and elevating it into something that doesn't even match words. What is happening? It's like a kind of delirium. What are you doing? Like,
yeah. Well, I
yeah,
think what's happening, to maybe use the Black Star record as a reference, when Lazarus, that song, when David finishes singing, I come in with a note, and then I improvise
yeah,
over the harmonic structure of Lazarus, without the bridge, what I would call the bridge. And then on the record, it happens for a certain amount of time, and then it goes to the outro where Tim plays a dee 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 do do do, and that ends the song. So what's happening at the cutting room is we get to that point, and then I'm improvising, but my solo length is open. So which means that I'm improvising, and I'm essentially trying to tell my story of that moment in that space. And then when I'm ready to end, I cue the band and we end the song. So it's a lot longer live than it is on the
yeah,
record, but it's an opportunity for me to stretch out and to do something that is an essential part of my musical uh, expression, which is
yeah,
improvising.
yeah,
And that's where I started. When I started playing saxophone, I was 12 years old, and my father's a jazz musician, and my parents were divorced, and he would bring his keyboard over to my where my mom lived and carry it up to this barn and set it up, and we would jam. And that opportunity for me, even as a beginner and a very inexperienced player, that's what really, the opportunity for me to express myself emotionally was really what hooked me into becoming a musician
yeah,
and an improviser. And I think that's the line for me.
yeah,
And so in that moment, that's what's going on. And Gail, is just an incredible artist. I have so much love for her, and respect for her. She's supporting me by being present in that moment, by listening, and
yeah,
being really a part of it. And that's something that's so it's so touching to me that she is meaningful to me, that she's so supportive in those moments and will take the journey kind of with me. And it's really it's just an honor to do that song with her, especially given her um, relationship with David, and given her the emotional ballast that she brings to everything she does. She's just a very inspiring artist.
yeah. It was one of the moments in the concert where everything else stopped, right? It's,
Mm.
the format was, people were sitting at tables and having their dinner. And so there were a lot of songs that I wanted to just tell everybody to just shut up, just listen. But they did for that. So you mentioned in passing that you had access to some of the lyrics on some of the songs on Blackstar before they were recorded, which some of the other musicians that worked with Bowie that I've spoken with didn't. I'm not speaking about Blackstar, but on other albums. And I wanted to ask, how important are the lyrics? I think for a lot of fans, we spend a lot of time just thinking, well, what does it mean? And how much is
Sure.
that in your head when you're making the music?
Yeah, I to me that goes to, it's such a individual and personal thing, right? And
Yeah,
I just happen to not be as much of a lyric person and
yeah,
more of an emotional person
yeah,
as I process music. So yes, I studied the lyrics and I was looking for meaning, but well, not, but yes, I did. And then when we were in the studio and we were playing, though, I can tell you that I was reacting much more to the energy I was feeling from David
Yeah, yeah,
and the emotion of the moment. It was 100% that for me. But that's how I am.
yeah,
Um, it was an interview with Herbie Hancock that I read or listened to, and he was talking about the same dynamic, you know. So I think it's different for everybody. And it's interesting because now, years later, like at the cutting room show, you know, I'm thinking about, I'm listening to them. I don't, when they do station to station, I don't play on that. And so I'm listening to the lyrics and really, really enjoying, you
yeah,
know, I'm able to appreciate now because um, I've had the opportunity to be so much closer to a lot of his music over these years. I do appreciate, and I appreciate what a deep lyricist he was. It's amazing, his command of language. And I remember him talking about it, and we were working on "Girl Loves Me," you know, and
yeah,
just the combination of slang from a certain period, of certain subculture in the UK, London, mixed with the Clockwork Orange.
yeah,
I'm forgetting the name of it, you know, and just he was sort of talking about that a little bit in the studio, and um, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So yeah, I guess I said what I was going
yeah,
to say. Where just for me, it just always hews to the emotional side
yeah.
rather than the analytical. What do the lyrics mean?
So just to push it on one song, because I've got the opportunity to ask,
Sure.
what in the world is "'Tis a Pity She's a Whore" about? I know it's the title of a 17th century play, but what
Yeah,
in the world is that song about?
I don't know.
Okay, all right.
I don't
That's what I
know.
thought you were gonna say.
Yeah, yeah. I knew it was a play, but I never checked out, you know, the play or the Cliff Notes version
Yeah.
of the play. So yeah,
Okay. Well, I am going to ask you about two other songs, and you mentioned one of them, "Dollar Days." It's hard not to listen to "Dollar Days" and not think it was Bowie saying goodbye, and it's hard not to think of "I Can't Give Everything Away" and not think that it was very deliberately meant to be the very last song on his very last album. But
Mhm.
again, is that are we fans applying meaning that wasn't there? Are we hearing "I'm dying too" as TOO, and it was really always meant to be TO? Um,
Mm. Mhm. Well, I feel like it's a situation where there's multiple truths happening. You know, the themes that you just mentioned are undeniable,
yeah,
right? Um, and you know, how could you, you know, the him leaving that as a final album? I mean, it's such a dramatic, bold, you know, courageous statement. And I remember Tony Visconti saying in an interview, um, something to the, you know, I'm paraphrasing, you know, like it was David's parting gift to his fans and stuff. So yeah, I don't dispute any of that at all. But what was also true was the last time I talked to him in December before he passed, you know, he was saying, um, let's get back in the studio and record some
yeah,
more. I've got some more music, you know, or I'm working on some more music and maybe in January, you know, like he was, so that was true too. So that's what I mean by both things were true. I think in the both things, there's truth in both. Like he never articulated to me that this was his final album or anything around that. Um, but there's so much more mortality. You know, the themes are there.
yeah,
But then also he was looking forward to making more music.
yeah. I've heard that before. And are there fragments of songs or song ideas or even demos that putting aside the legal challenges, somebody like you could take and turn into something that doesn't exist?
Uh, I mean, like I would never even consider doing something like that.
Yeah,
You know, it
yeah,
just doesn't feel like I would just never consider doing something that because I have no idea if it's something that he would have ever approved of, and so yeah, I would never think of it. But it's hard for me to remember. Like there might be a couple things that didn't come out, but I don't know what state they ended up in. You know, I
yeah,
don't know if he ever
yeah,
finished the lyrics. I don't know if he ever did you know, a vocal, he finished the vocals, or, you know, maybe he didn't like the tune or something. So there was a couple things I think that didn't come out, but yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah. The EP No Plan came out
Hmm.
posthumously, and is that basically what I'm describing, or was there a plan to release No Plan?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, good. I don't know. And certainly when I listen to No Plan, you know, those aren't totally produced or finished. You know what I mean? Some of
yeah,
the stuff on, I mean, it's
yeah,
great. I love those tunes. But what am I trying to say here? Yeah, there's elements where I feel like they weren't quite finished, you know,
yeah. No, I
which
do.
is fine.
I've often thought that it's like I'm glad that that exists, and I like the songs. But if any one of those songs that wasn't on Blackstar was on Blackstar, I actually think it would have detracted from the whole of the album. It seems like it just
Mm,
fits,
mhm,
which is not taking away from the value of the song, but they didn't seem like they were exactly finished. Yeah,
mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
So Black Star Symphony. Um,
Yes.
yeah, what is it? You recently did it in St. Louis, and I know you've got a few. You've got plans for it coming up in the western part of the United States. But more importantly, when is it coming to Albany, New York?
Well, hopefully soon. Hopefully
Yes.
soon. Yeah, the Black Star Symphony was the story behind that is y- of course, you know, people you know, there was would we play Black Star live and everything and you know, I never really wanted to do that without David. And although we did play loud, we do, and we continue to play Lazarus as an instrumental, which feels appropriate. But I was doing a project with the Metropole Orchestra in Europe with Jules Buckley, and the two of us were at dinner one night, and that was primarily music of mine from the Blow record. Um, but there was some other things, and we did Warsaw and Look Back in Anger. And there was something really powerful about hearing Warsaw with studio orchestra. I mean, it was really moving. And so we were at dinner after one of the rehearsals, and it just kind of came up about, you know, what would it look like to do Black Star with this formation? And that felt compelling.
Yeah,
That felt compelling. And that felt like something that David would have been into if it
yeah,
was done the right way with the right people. That felt like something that would take the blueprint of Black Star and to create something that was new with the DNA of Black Star, but to have some moments where we push the envelope here and push it there, and to try to create a new piece of art that would be an extension of Black Star.
yeah,
So really, that's how it came to pass. And then there was, you know, a period of finding an investor, you know, organizing the production, and then COVID, and that sort of happened at the beginning, and then the COVID happened, and so sort of the gestation got delayed because of world circumstances. But you know, a lot of thought went into who would be the people to orchestrate these pieces.
yeah,
You know, so Maria Schneider um, uh, is she did Sue, and so that the version of Sue the Black Star Symphony does is really based on her version with David,
yeah,
not the Black Star record.
yeah,
But it felt appropriate because when this project is at its zenith, It's a combination of the 65, you're hearing the sound of the 65-piece orchestra, whose parts are not just long notes behind the band rocking out. It's really, the parts are pretty involved. So it's hearing that along with my band and along with the combination. We have three singers, David Poe, Gail Ann Dorsey, and John Cameron Mitchell. And so it's, sometimes it's one, sometimes it's two, sometimes it's three of them. But, the combination of all of that is when this thing really elevates and takes off. Um, sorry, so Maria agreed to do Sue. So Tony Visconti does Dollar Days. Vince Mendoza, who's one of the, premier arranger conductors in the, in this world, he did the song Black Star. Jules Buckley, who was my, partner at the beginning of this process and conducts when he can. He did three songs, Lazarus, a couple others. Tim Davies, who also conducts this gig, did a great arrangement. Michael Dudley, who's a young arranger. Jamshid Sharifi, who I went to college with, who's an amazing. They're all amazing. So it's something really special, and I feel like everybody's arrangements really fit well together throughout the
Yeah.
program.
Well, Donnie, I haven't seen it yet, but to me, it sounds like this is a project that's made to be played under the stars at a place like Bethel Woods or SPAC or Tanglewood, all of which happen to be within driving distance of where I live. So if that's something you'd consider.
No, I think it's all under consideration. I mean, our next show that's confirmed is in Nashville in the
Yeah.
middle of June, and then we're doing a night, maybe two nights in San Francisco at the end of June. There's rumors of maybe something happening before that, which I'll update on social media if it happens. And then there's more plans in the fall and for next year. But as you mentioned at the top, we just did St. Louis about 2 weeks ago, and it was, I think, the best performance yet. It keeps growing, and I keep learning, and we keep tweaking it as we go. And it's exciting to do it, and it's something special when with all those people on the stage and hearing that music in this um, in this imagination of it. It's really special.
Yeah. Wow. I look forward to seeing it. So Donnie, let me this might be a good place uh to land the plane, although I feel like I could talk to you for hours, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you consider coming back?
I'd be happy to. Yeah.
That would be so wonderful. I do want to close out by asking you the most superficial possible question, which I ask everybody, which is whether you played on it or not, what is your favorite Bowie song and album?
Ooh. Ooh. That's a good question. Oh my gosh. Wow. Wow. Okay, my favorite song and favorite album. Yeah, that's a tough one. I have to think about that for a minute. I think Life on Mars
Yeah,
is my favorite song currently.
yeah,
So it's one of those things where if you ask me in a week, I might give you a different answer,
yeah,
depending on what I'm listening to, or 6 months from now, I might give you a different answer. But right now, I'm going to say Life on Mars because it's just a song, I've been working on it a little bit, and just the way it moves, it's just, I could just go on and on about it. It's just masterful songwriting.
yeah,
Let me just say that. And then for album, that's also really tough. I mean, um, Low is one of my favorites.
yeah,
Hunky Dory is one of my favorites. Um, oh my gosh. Yeah.
yeah,
it's hard for me to be, I love Black Star, but it's also hard for me to
yeah.
listen to that much. Um, I'm going to go with Low.
Okay, all right. Well, if you come
Again,
back
but I
up,
might give you next time when I come back next time. Let's ask me that question again. It'll be well because I'll probably forget, and I'll probably give you two completely different answers.
all right, fair enough. I would give a different answer every day. So
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you.
uh,
Thank you.
so Donnie McCaslin, thank you so much for joining me. And I just want to say, Blackstar is so special. It's so meaningful to me as a fan, and I know a lot of the people that engage with this show speak about Blackstar just in a different way. And so, on behalf of
Yes.
all of us, I just want to thank you for making it and making it happen, and thank you for keeping the legacy alive. So, Donny McCaslin, this
Yeah.
has been wonderful.
Thank you so much. That's really meaningful to hear, and you know, I'm honored by that, and it means a lot to me to try to carry um, the you know to carry forth and always thinking about doing stuff that he would feel good about with the Black Star Symphony. You know,
Yeah.
doing it in a way that honors his incredible artistic and his artistic legacy and his human legacy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.